All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining this morning's eTruck Workforce Development Advisory Committee meeting. It is the last one of the 2024 calendar year, and we appreciate your time today. We're very excited to present to you all an overview, right, of all of the WDAC meetings we've had. I'll get into that in a bit, but with that, why don't we take it to the next slide, please? Again, we'll get started first, as we always do, with just a welcome introduction of the team, as well as a project overview, overall eTruck overview, and WDAC overview. We always do this as we recognize there's folks in the room that it may be their first time joining. I believe that is actually the case today as well. And so we like to just kick it off with a quick little snippet of an overview of the project and of this advisory committee and the goals of this advisory committee. And so again, we welcome everyone and ask for you all to type in the chat your name, organization that you're with, and if you'd like to be added to our communications email listserv, please put in your email in the chat so that we can capture that and be able to add you, and you can receive our updates moving forward. With that, let's kick it off with some team introductions. I'm Giovanni Hernandez. I'm the Clean Mobility Program Manager with Grid Alternatives of Greater Los Angeles. I'll kick it off to my colleagues, Shamika and Stella.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shamika Dixon, and I'm the Director of Workforce Development here at Grid Alternatives, and I'm going to pass it off to Stella.
All right. Thank you, Shamika. Thank you, Giovanni. My name is Stella Ursula. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships at the LA office of Grid Alternatives. Thank you so much for being here today. And I'll hand it over to our CalSTART partners. I think it's Giovanna.
Hi, everyone. Giovanna Escamilla. I'm an Associate Project Manager, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'll pass it over to Kristen.
Oh, you're on mute there, Kristen.
Oh, apologies. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Bush. I'm a data analyst and researcher with EPRI's electric transportation team. Thank you all for joining us today.
I'd say we also have Andra on the call. Andra, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Andra Rogers with EPRI. Nice to see you all today.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. With that, next slide, and I'll send it off to Gia.
All right. Thank you for joining if you're new. So quick project overview. The purpose of this project is to create a California research hub to facilitate and accelerate the electrification of the heavy-duty drayage vehicle market in key areas. So we have a few goals and objectives. These are to, 1, advance research, development, and demonstration activities that extend the delivery range of large, medium, and heavy-duty battery electric trucks, beginning with drayage operations. Next, we engage broad stakeholders with a community-first approach, so advisory committees like this one, and use this input to promote equity and workforce development opportunities in priority communities. And finally, the last one is to plan, design, and deploy innovative, scalable public corridor charging strategies for heavy-duty electric trucks. And again, this all begins with drayage.
Thank you for that, Gia. And with that, just a quick little overview of this Workforce Development Advisory Committee, the goals and objectives and functions of this particular advisory committee, WDAC for short, as we call it, is to ensure that pollution impacted and underserved and tribal communities are involved in creating and guiding the initiative, and that these priority communities are involved and benefit from the larger clean energy transition, particularly in the heavy duty electrification, and that jobs created and other resultant economic opportunities are also determined via this project. And so some quick objectives is to inform the project on this advisory committee is to help inform the project on the development needs and desired impacts for priority communities, communicate project activities to relevant key partners and stakeholders, promotion of equity and workforce development opportunities in priority communities, and to foster workforce development partnerships in the targeted priority communities for zero emission freight corridor technology and development planning and job creation. And so with that, let's move on to the next slide with overall project updates with Gia.
Okay, thank you. So just a heads up, our next industry partner webinar series meeting is going to be on November 6th, and we're going to be going over EV site planning 101. So you don't want to miss that one. Also, there are 4 new reports up on the eTruck website. You can visit the documents reports page to read these and access various fact sheets. eTruck's Advanced Transportation Research Center will be completed for high power testing in November 2024, so very soon, and this is at SCE's EV Charging Lab in Pomona, California. Construction began this summer for the pilot sites in Ontario and Carson, California, and should be finishing up sometime next year. And the eTruck's regional freight heat map is live on eTruck website. We're working on updating this with an equity layer soon, and it'll have another update coming up in the next couple months. And finally, you can find us on all of our social media platforms if you scan that QR code right there. But yeah, those are the updates right now, and I will pass it back.
All right, thank you for that, Gia. So yeah, let's get started with our presentation for today. So I guess I wanted to start off by just providing a little bit of context to today's meeting and this presentation that will follow. So the purpose is to provide a brief overview of key findings from all of the WDAC meetings that have been conducted between October 2022, which is actually when we launched the WDAC for the first time, up until July 2024, which was our last quarterly meeting that was held before this one. In total, there have been 8 quarterly WDAC meetings and 1 subcommittee meeting that we had earlier on back in 2022 to obtain feedback on our workforce development plan. At these meetings, we have covered a variety of relevant workforce development topics and have had numerous guest presenters provide their industry perspectives and recommendations relevant to the goals of this project. The following slides in this presentation will highlight a compilation of some common themes, concerns, feedback, and recommendations we heard from you all and from industry partners that may have joined us as guest presenters at one of our meetings. Our goal today is to present you with this overview, though not comprehensive, and solicit your thoughts and additional feedback and or recommendations you may have for this project. Perhaps you missed one of our meetings, and today would be an opportunity to chime in on a topic you would like to comment on. We will sprinkle 3 discussion questions that will be embedded within the presentation itself to gather more input and hear from you all. Lastly, we also did invite members of our Industry Technology Advisory Committee, ITAC for short, to today's meeting in hopes that they could hear some of these findings and provide any industry insights and perspectives from what they're hearing. So with that, let's get started. So next slide. All right, so this theme here is something that came up just very early on when we launched the WDAC. And so as you can see from this slide, we had WDAC members that mentioned that union and non-union opportunities can coexist and that there is space for both in this sector. We also heard that non-union startups can provide credible training and job opportunities for workforce participants, offering flexibility in the sector. And that creating pathways for both union and non-union enhances job diversity and accessibility. And so an example of one of these that was brought up, that was stated from one of our WDAC members, was that perhaps when union apprenticeship programs are full, that there perhaps could be programs that offer other kinds of training and upskilling in the meantime. So there's opportunity for these kinds of partnerships between union and non-union organizations to create a pre-apprenticeship program and help this sector and workers thrive together. So that's something that folks were really vocal about early on. Next slide. All right, so we also heard about inclusion of women in the workforce. So there are significant opportunities to increase female representation as a whole in the clean energy sector, and of course the ZEB sector, which we're specifically talking about with e-truck. We also mentioned, or it was also mentioned, that workforce programs should actively target and create opportunities for women, providing pathways into traditionally male-dominated fields, and that that there should be support for mentorship and outreach programs that help women advance within the industry. And so with this particular topic, to further dive into it and hear your thoughts on it, I'm actually going to turn it over briefly to my colleague Shamika for our first discussion question. We'll spend a few minutes here as we'll to hear your thoughts, as we'll then need to carry on with the rest of the presentation. So feel free to share your responses via the chat or raise your hand and come off mute if that is what you prefer. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shamika for our first question.
Good morning again, everyone. So as we talked about women in workforce, particularly as it pertains to construction and a renewable energy space, it generated a few questions for us. And so I'm going to read off the question, but it's a very loaded question. So if you all need me to read it again, please let me know. What are we doing as a workforce industry to support women while they're in a male-dominated field? The support exists within training programs, but not so much in the field. What more needs to be done to retain women in traditionally male-dominated fields? And how are we training men to be allies to women that we are encouraging to join these spaces? Does anyone have some initial thoughts from those questions?
Shamika, this is Stella. Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Rawls had her hand up.
Yes, Dr. Rawls,
Apologize.
please
Go ahead.
feel free to Dr.
Hi.
Rawls. Hi.
How you doing, y'all?
Okay.
So clearly we have this issue in many fields that are male dominated, IT being one of them, a field that I'm intimately familiar with. And one of the things that I've seen happen and be very successful are cohorts of mentorship led by senior leadership. Because if senior leadership is perceived to value an initiative, then everyone else tends to fall in some kind of a line, right?
Mhm.
So really not employee resource groups where the onus is upon the employee to carve out some space for themselves, but leadership, executive leadership in particular, led initiatives to support the development. So, right, there's a benefit to leaders who are mentoring cohorts of other affinity groups.
Mhm. That's a really good idea. I think we've thought about like the mentorship aspect, but as at the employee level. So definitely taking it up, I think will be really impactful. Commissioner?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Hey, and so yes, I agree with you, Doctor. It's the cohorts and the mentorship. For instance, like Lacey's All Women EV program. They have monthly gatherings where professionals come, women, people who are currently in the industry, startups, those who are interested, are able to come together, learn, and collaborate. And then with the mentorship, making sure that it has an intergenerational framework. For instance, they train middle school young women with ZEV. And so they have demonstration days after they work on projects. And so it's that hands-on, and hopefully we can get to pay to work model that will really provide the incentive and create the pathway in order for these opportunities to come, and not just stop at workforce development, but also the entrepreneur component. Thank you.
That's all those suggestions are great. And I think all of those suggestions that Dr. Ross gave and Commissioner gave, those all happen while the women are in our cohorts, are they working for us. But like, what are some solutions that we can kind of think through as the women are in the field and they're working with these developers, they're working at these construction companies? Because a lot of the times those are spaces that we have no control over. And so we just have to trust that we're equipping the women that we're bringing in our programs and giving them the skill to, to navigate those spaces. So as we think about outside of our organizations, what does that look like for women in these industries? Jonathan?
No, I completely agree with the cohorts. From a male's perspective, there's so much stuff sometimes I don't know what I don't know. I think short little opportunities to go through, and it could be just scenarios and situations that have happened in the previous situations, especially in the field, that we could walk through from a female's perspective of where they felt oftentimes either slighted, uncomfortable, disrespected, or whatever all of those things are. I would love to hear more about those situations, and then hear it from a female's perspective. But it doesn't have to be a long training. It
Yeah.
could be, thought of the day, and just go through 5, 10 minutes. I think that builds a culture for me to learn more about it, and at the same time, not necessarily get bogged down with a whole day training that I may not have time to actually attend and really focus on.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. And I think like when you think about the realm of nonprofit or community-based organizations, I think a lot of like these EID kind of initiatives like just live within our organizations. But how do we hold employers accountable to have like these small check-ins? How do we encourage women that we work with to kind of initiate that conversation without the fear of being retaliated against or whatever that looks like, right? But no, I think that was an awesome point. Judith?
Hi, I think it's all these are great points, and yes, it is important for women to be involved and have opportunities. But I also believe that in order to make that effective, we have to create environments where women feel safe. And for me, that's the most important aspect, because if we don't feel safe in our environment and supported by the males or others in the environment, then all of our efforts are wasted. And so I think there's a certain maybe allyship or partnering that needs to happen to build that safety first.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, it makes sense 100%.
Because we can do all the advocacy that we can do. I can do all the advocacy I can do. But if others around me aren't in tune with the importance of why, or understand why these things are necessary, then we're not going to make any progress. So I think it's opening up also that educational opportunity for everyone to learn the importance of buying into a structure with that.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, you're definitely correct. I think safety and feeling safe in the space that you're in is should be a number one priority, especially when it comes to employers. But I think a lot of the time it's kind of like the attractive thing to say, like, let's get women in these male-dominated spaces, but there's
That's
nothing
right.
happening on the back end to make sure
Mhm.
that, women are protected in these spaces. So
That's
you're-
right, especially within these types of industries.
yeah.
And so you've got to have higher ups schooling their supervisors and things like that to carry that throughout, to weave it throughout the industry or the business. So it's a whole environmental culture shift, especially in male dominated industries.
Yeah, 100%. Stella?
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Judy and Commissioner Dejo and Dr. Rawls. What a great discussion, great question. I just wanted to mention it is that I hear what you're all saying, and it's so critical that that this type of support exists within the entire organization. Where we're sending our women to various organizations, and we're hoping that they're going to provide support, and they're going to continue to make sure that, to your point, that this environment is safe, right? We've had situations in the past where we had a couple of young ladies that ended up at a electric vehicle car company. We thought, oh, this is perfect, wonderful, it's mission aligned, they're thinking about the environment and clean cars, etc. And those women were treated so badly. I mean, it was horrible. And so we all have to be aware, pay attention. And I know that Shamika and her team what are the days called, Shamika, where you bring in potential employers to take a look at the training, and what is the showcase? I think
Yeah, it's a rooftop ready showcase, but we also are developing a mentorship program, and not just for the trainee, but for the employer. Because I think unless the employer is bought in on our mission and our values, how can we expect them to understand our trainees that we're sending to them? So we're doing it on the reverse, because I think a lot of intentionality is around your participants when it should be probably the other way as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. No, it's so important. I see another hand out there.
Reverend JJ?
Yeah, so yeah, a lot great discussion, needed discussion, but actually the answer is in the solution. We do need to establish and a go-to, so to speak, or where the participants have affirmations that they know they have support behind them. I know anytime I send out young ladies or young men for that, or from South Bureau Ministerial Alliance, once they've been trained or what have you, then we give them that confirmation that we're not sending you out here wrong. You have support you back up, and if there's no accountability coming from the employers, we all have some responsibility in it, but then it starts with that to deploy the situation wherever it is that you're established. They need to know that there's somebody that's for a watchdog, so to speak, somebody that's holding them accountable. And I think this would be and there's when the question was asked, what kind of support do they have? They have very little support on from a reality point. But if we establish that, I'm not one of those people that believe, because it's been done this way historically, it has to stay that way. Let's fix that situation. One of the ways is establishing a group or committee or whatever we want to call it, a collective, but to make sure and ensure that we're going to be looking out, and you're going to be accountable.
Yeah.
Great,
Agreed.
thank you all. I want to move us on to in the interest of time, to the next bucket here, theme that we want to present to you. I did want to just read off Tony Zamora over at BP put in the chat that at BP, we have recruitment programs to target hiring women, and we also have programs in place to support women in engineering and other roles to improve our inclusion and development. Thank you for adding that, Tony. So with that, we have more to discuss and to hear about. So thank you all for your comments, and we'll have an opportunity later on at the end to hear some more as well. Thank you for taking us to the next slide, Gia. So to this point here on leveraging labor market data. So in early 2022, we presented a glimpse of a job posting analysis in this sector conducted by our friends over at Cal State University Dominguez Hills with Dr. Ross, who is present here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross, for being here today and your comments. And so the project team, so again, that was a very early, just like snippet analysis, right? That was very helpful to look into, and we appreciate our partners over at Cal State Dominguez Hills for giving us a glimpse into that. And so the project team, has some plans to conduct another analysis with some updated current numbers, and even expand the analysis to assist the project in determining key information that will help in putting together recommendations for curriculum and trainings in this sector. But some of the things that you see that came up, right, related, right, as you can see, using labor market information to identify industry trends and specific skill gaps, develop new training programs aligned with employer needs, particularly in digital credentials and certifications, research which skills are critical for future industry growth and tailor training curricula accordingly, leverage partnerships with industry and educational institutions to ensure the training reflects current labor market needs, and use real-time, again, labor data and job postings to identify skills gaps and training needs. So you can see the themes there that kind of came up with this sort of bucket here, if you will. Next slide, please. All right. So with building partnerships, across all our meetings, we heard a common theme of the importance of inclusive strategies and collaboration between industry, educational institutions, and community organizations. So you can see certain things that came up, particularly around strengthening partnerships in the education system, the K-12 model, but also in adult education programs, community colleges, and untraditional education pathways. We want to be very intentional about including that. The untraditional education pathways, our workforce development director, Shamika, is always very intentional about making sure that we're inclusive in this realm, and that we don't just label K to 12 or higher education, but that we're also including all the other avenues, right, where folks enroll, right, where folks in our priority communities maybe dropped out of the traditional education system, but ended up enrolling in a different untraditional pathway that ends up getting them, finishing their education and on to higher education or other vocational training programs, right? So that's something that we want to make sure to elevate. Another member brought up about exploring dual articulation agreements to create seamless transitions from traditional to non-traditional high schools to higher education, or to vocational and technical training, and partnering with industry experts to offer hands-on specialized training that directly meet workforce demands. And lastly, to collaborate with clean tech startups as well and other industry leaders and education partners to develop relevant, future-focused curricula. And so once again, I'll hand it over to my colleague Shamika for our next question, where we'll spend a few minutes having a discussion there.
Hey again. So I guess I just want to tie a couple of things together, and then we could get to the question. So as Giovanni mentioned, there's so many different avenues that an individual can connect to get into clean mobility, renewable energy, or just the green sector overall. And so when we think about the employers, a lot of them are doing internal trainings and training people within and then promoting them up. So how do So companies may typically promote from within and may not hire students who do not go through their internal trainings. How can we address such hiring disparities and also make sure that the curriculum or programs that are being developed are actually entry points into these opportunities as they come down the pipeline? Does anyone have some initial thoughts? Michael?
Yeah, this is Michael Renler with E7 Architecture Studio. I'd like to talk about the idea of embedding this training narrative within all the public works contracts. The Los Angeles Unified School District has a capstone project. The capstone project is trying to link together this idea of relevancy in education, and this creates partnerships directly with industry. So if you get a contract from the LA Unified School District, you have to write in your RFP response your solution to include their students in some kind of mentorship, some kind of what Jackie Badeo called pay to learn model. And many organizations could adopt this narrative to actually do on-site development. And this idea of relevancy sits at the core of our kind of catastrophe in education for our at-risk population. And so I want to put that on the table because in these emerging technologies that we're talking about, such as EV station chargers, such as hydrogen trucks, hydrogen-driven trucks, all of these ideas around how we're going to do the next generation digital workflows, these things are being contracted with companies. And those companies can have language in their agreements for funding sources. The Chip and Science Act is a good example, the infrastructure bill, Metro, Department of Water and Power. Every single one of these agencies that's receiving large federal money can have language to actually have a pay to learn component. I'm getting ready to go to Las Vegas to talk to them about this with their Metro system. So we know that this is really important, how community colleges and high school and non-traditional learning environments could actually get embedded with direct partnerships. I know HUD has a Jobs Plus program. I've talked to them about this. So I'm going to leave it there. But I think that getting the language correct, even when I see you having contracts within your own organizations, is there language in your contracts to include students to actually have a pay to learn model? And I think that, you know, this is creating a lot of division between the relevancy of education and the relevancy of employment. And so I think it can get to the language of contracting work.
Wow, that was powerful, Michael. Does anybody want to add to what Michael has said or want to bring up a different perspective to the space? Okay. Is there any kind of opinion on this? Because if not, I can ask another question. Mr. Rodney?
Echoing off Michael, his opinion was actually really great. Have the federal government add that into their policies. I totally agree with him. That's something that they need to itemize, and we need to petition to the legislative branch of California to include that in the Constitution of California because it's vital and it sounds really cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Well,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you, Mr. Rodney.
Okay.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add or just echo?
If not, I could move us along, Shamika, and just in the
Yeah.
interest of time, and then we can also have more time after we wrap up. There's just 3 more slides to get through, and then we can open it up for Q&A, and then any additional thoughts that folks may have. All right, but thank you for those great comments. Gia, next slide, please. All right, so just kind of on going off of what we just mentioned, right, about the education system that we were just talking about and how we can better partner. It was also brought up about just how we can how there can be early exposure to this new pathway of clean energy careers to our students, to our kids. So how do we educate? How do we build those partnerships in the education system, all across the education system, to expose high school students and college students about these new pathways, these new career opportunities in clean energy and related fields? And then how do we target opportunity youth as well, and include them in these conversations, in these plans, right? From underserved communities for workforce development initiatives. And then also, how can there was a question of how we can promote early engagement in clean energy pathways. So so to this point, not just starting at like the high school level, but how can we start earlier in the education journey of a student and families, right? So how can we then introduce these new pathways in elementary and the middle school level to not just students, but also families? Because here's an opportunity to engage families, educate parents about these potential, about these new pathways that also could be relevant for them, as not just to introduce students, but maybe for also their parents, if they're looking to maybe join some type of certification program, upskilling. So this is something that could benefit the future students, but also their families, right? So that's something that was brought up as well. Gia, can we move on to the next slide? Related to this is feedback from industry and education. So how can we collaborate with industry partners to identify that the skills that are needed for these future job roles in this ever evolving clean energy sector, right? And so we know that the technology is constantly changing, improving, getting better. There's a lot of now intersection between the different technologies where you can now pair solar and battery storage and zero emission vehicles, right? Particularly battery electric vehicles. So how do we continue to identify all the skills that are going to be needed in future roles and sort of keep up with this evolving industry? It was recommended that for there to be a development of stackable portable certifications that align with industry standards and provide career mobility, as well as focusing on creating curriculum modules tailored to specific job roles within the battery electric truck industry, including hands-on technical training, and to partner with battery electric truck stakeholders to scale training programs that prepare workers for future industry demands. I have one more slide to get through, and then we will have one more discussion questions, and we'll get to the raise hands that I see. So stay patient with me there. Let me just get through this one last slide. Gia, can we get to the next slide? All right, and with that, the last bucket that we kind of wanted to present on related to what we were just talking about, integrating soft skills and certifications, right? So we're just talking about some potential recommendations for curriculum and certification programs. And so with that, it was recommended to develop training programs that combine technical skills with soft skills, such as communication, teamwork, and problem solving. to offer stackable certifications that allow workers to progress through different levels of expertise, enhancing their career flexibility, and to ensure that certifications are recognized across the clean energy industries, making them portable and valuable in various clean energy sectors. Again, we just talked about in the last slide how a lot of these technologies are now talking to each other, are interconnected with one another as the technology gets better and better. Again, you're pairing solar with battery storage, with battery electric trucks, vehicles. And so how then do we keep up with this emerging technology and industry to ensure that certification programs and trainings don't keep workers siloed and can actually move across the clean energy industry for better opportunities, for upskilling, more professional development, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of benefits with ensuring that certification programs and trainings are portable across the industry, clean energy industry more specifically. And then there was a question that was posed of how do we address gaps within the electric vehicle and electric vehicle supply, EVSCE technician trainings programs, particularly focusing on key areas like safety procedures, systems knowledge, and certifications. So that's all that was raised, that we sort of combined into these different themes that we heard from all of our meetings. With that, I know we have one more question that I'll kick it off to Shamika so that we can get to, and then we can also hear from the raised hands that we have in the virtual room here. Shamika?
So the last question that we have for you all is, how can we ensure that short-term training certification programs are portable across various clean energy sectors so that portable doesn't only apply to those with higher degrees? Is there some initial thoughts? And I know some folks' hands are raised. So I don't know if you're raising your hand again for this, but please feel free to jump in if you have something to add to this question.
Go ahead. You can go first. I'm sorry.
So I do a lot of work with learner employment records and badging certification systems. And newer technology has a standard called OB3, right? And so it's this system of portability. So whatever the credential is, whomever is issued from, it can then be transferred into the user's wallet. So one recommendation would really be to join your friends in higher education as we, and others, right? I do a lot of work with adult education as well, but I'm at CSUDH, where we are investigating how are our credentials portable outside of the university, those that are related to soft skills and those that are related to experiences you get outside of the university that all culminate into the ability to participate in different fields. So the standards are relatively new, learner employment records, badge portability, certification portability. The technology is present, and I'd be more than happy to share more information with the group on how you could possibly work with them.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is there any kind of conversations or meetings happening now that folks that do non-traditional kind of employment training can join and just kind of dialogue around what that looks like? So there is this continuous kind of progression towards badging, just not being at the community college or CSUs or UCs, and actually have like the non-traditional kind of pathways as badges as well. I think that'd be really a cool discussion to have.
I dropped the Digital Credentials Consortium link. MIT is leading the work, but it is that. It is not just for higher education, it's for all of us.
That's amazing. Love that. Thank you, thank you, Dr. Ross.
Shamika, Dr.
Yes.
Ross pretty much answered my question I had, but she pretty much answered my question. How will the portable certificates be ported to you? And she pretty much answered that question. Where's Dr. Ross?
isn't it always amazing when that happens? And it's like, okay,
I'm glad.
there's something happening out there. Let's just share what's happening. Commissioner?
Yes, it was so much. The last three slides, right? And so my brain is all over. But for sure, in terms of non-traditional, I believe I did not see like homeschooling or churches as a way of a partnership. Sometimes churches have their own programs, but when it comes to the accessing the information, most definitely a technology component needs to be there. And for sure, we need, as for equity, we need high-speed data centers all throughout the community, partnership with the libraries, so people can access. And water work that I have done, we did a tool called Path to Tap. So I would say we would need a path to the workforce for this industry. And so there we could incorporate in the GIS integrated system, the locations of the trainings. I know we have the ZEV training that we're working on, and just somewhere you can plug all of the pieces, all of the academic institutions, but always leaving it open for a partnership with the internet service providers to add that added support. I can remember being in college and writing papers in the car in front of a Starbucks at midnight, and so those things also create the safety that's needed in order for us to reach everyone where they are. Thank you.
Shmika, if I can add, really quick, I think the flyer was great. That was sent out, and I was able to share that with some of the stakeholders in the community, or some of the pillars within the community, and I think the churches will probably pretty much agree. It really didn't define out that, hey, these jobs are retirement jobs, and a lot of people, I guess, they lack the educational knowledge, and people are looking for retirement jobs in the community. Far as the different levels to it, I think that's very important. I think that a lot of people don't know that there's different levels to the different job market. So there's different levels for management, and there's different educational levels, and people are looking for entry level jobs. But one of the things that really caught my attention was the training piece. It's very vital that we have a training piece, because I don't know, in San Pedro there was a bus fire and nobody knew how to put out this bus fire, and it was a lithium battery bus fire, and no one knew how to put out this fire because it was lithium battery. So it was a safety training component piece. So I agree, and I think we should have an all around training piece. I'm done. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
And I agree, because I think a lot of the time, like when we take this information back to the community, a lot of folks have a hard time imagining something that has not happened. Even as the industry is moving, and companies are coming out with like all these new tech, or all these new kind of like systems, and like just bringing it to the world, it's really hard to kind of conceptualize like what that looks like, and what type of level of education does someone need to be in these spaces. But also, I think particularly for the communities that we work with in Grid, when you say things like, oh, battery storage training, or EVSC maintenance technician, a lot of folks are like, oh, I don't think I qualify for that, because it sounds just like so big. It sounds like so monstrous. And so, like, how do we make sure that as we develop these things and we have these conversations, how do we make it digestible for the people that we're developing it for? And I think it's kind of like we do it as we're working type of thing. Not sure really. Michael?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of circle back a little bit with a term I call the pipeline, which really talks about the youth and how the youth track. I think a lot of times it's too late. And so we got to really think this problem through earlier. And I'd like to piggyback on to what Commissioner Badeo is talking about. We're working with a national team on something called STEM Labs. and what STEM labs really mean and what they can do. And specifically in Los Angeles, we've been working with Avalon Carver in a deployment of what we call pop-up STEM labs. And this whole idea of bringing community science into the community of what environmental science means around a curriculum that we put together. I'm going to put this in the chat. This is a book that we published called Terrestrial Architecture. In the middle of the book is a program called DCAP. We tested this in Watts and Kansas City, and we're working on it in Las Vegas as well. We've done some work with the with the Department of Health Services in South Los Angeles. This is the idea that we need to really think through all 15 career pathways, because they're all going to touch this decarbonization process. And so if we embed it earlier, and to Ms. Badejo's point, we actually think about all the places where youth are enriched, then we can start to bring these geospatial technology and high performance computing centers directly into the community. And that's really necessary to actually bring augmented realities, because there's a term called latency. And if we don't have this localized, we're actually building a new red line.
Yeah.
And so people don't see the virtual world in that space yet. But people are moving to certain spaces based on accessibility to being able to build these virtual worlds or meta worlds. And so I share that because I think these kids, I call them kids, people in middle school and high school, they already live in that space. And so if we, as, you know, unfortunately, I'm elderly now, don't really bring this conversation down to them in these STEM labs that become experimental. And that's the word before innovation. We need that experimenting spirit. And so how you do that with all the traditional learning structures and curriculum space and approval processes, that's something we need to be smart about, because it's going to happen very quickly, and they're very astute, and they live in a very sophisticated world. So getting them to be excited and engaged is not trivial. And so I think that's part of what we're up against in delivering curriculum, delivering competencies. And what I talked about earlier, if we had it tied to contracts and pay to learn models, we could really, you know, go to the moon, if you will. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with that. And I think just from a GRID's perspective, we have just launched a program going into the high schools working with 11th and 12th graders. And we do 5 series over 5 modules over a course of 5 Saturdays, and then we pay them $500 at the end. And I, you know, obviously, like, the incentive is we get the $500, but the curriculum that we're implementing really is to get them starting to think in these spaces around clean mobility, renewable energy, and what that looks like. So we're really excited. So hearing you say that just makes me really excited that we're at least on the path to engaging the younger folks and getting them involved in these conversations. So I'm gonna pass it to Gio so we can, Gio, do we have time for Q&A, or do you?
Yeah, no, so a lot of great conversation and discussion here. So yeah, I just wanted to see what questions folks had before we wrap up, as we're coming up on time. I did see one question, Shamika, in the chat from Tony Zamora. He asked, are labor unions investing in EV industry related apprentice programs? Wanted to see if anyone knew or like had a response to that. I don't know if Shamika, Stella.
There's a lot of conversation happening specifically with IBEW, but a lot of that conversation is really around how do we kind of like monopolize and keep this in our in our area. So yeah, the conversation is happening, but I think there needs to be greater conversation in order for everyone to have access to the conversation that comes down as it pertains to like EVSC or even just renewable energy in that sense, because this industry kind of falls within certain. So like when you think about solar specifically, you can still put that under the umbrella of construction, or it can go under electrical. So just like really, so two things. We need to define what it is, but also short answer, the conversations are happening. Yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Shamika. Oh, go ahead, Ms.
Giovanni,
Stella.
just real quick, completely agree with Shamika. We have been reaching out on a regular, yearly basis, right? And we're trying to connect, our programs and other partner programs to unions. I know that there's a lot of pre-apprenticeship type of programs out there that are being discussed. There's a few that exist right now, but we've got some work to do there. So definitely want to keep on that, because we just feel like, part of the things that we talk about in the Green Workforce Task Force is, creating those pathways for education. And we have, a lot of partners that feel the same way. So we're all working towards that same, ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And just seeing that we're coming up on time, I do want to get us to the next slide, Gia, just real quick to make this last reminders and announcement. So this is the last WDAC meeting for the 2024 calendar year. The next calendar for the 2025 year for the WDAC quarterly meetings is still to be determined. We hope to have something in December for you all to provide like a schedule of what those quarterly meetings will look like for next year. So stay tuned. As Gia mentioned earlier in the project update slide, our next industry partner webinar series that is focused on EV Site Planning 101 will take place November 6th for that 1 hour. And then as always, we'll always follow up with you all with a copy of the presentation, the slides, and the link to the recording of the meeting. If we don't have your email, please put it in the chat so that we can capture it and include you in that follow-up email, and so that you can be in our communication list moving forward. With that, again, I just want to thank all of you for your time today, this rich discussion that we had. Thank you all so much for the wonderful questions, comments, feedback that came in. But with that, we did run out of time. We are at the hour, and I want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. So thank you all, and may you have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Shamika. Nice job.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, take care.
Great meeting. Bless everybody.
Everybody.